Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and along with me, as always, my esteemed colleague, Dr. Joe Hamlett. How are you doing today, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing good, Dr. Dave. How you doing?
And most excellent.
All
And
right.
for we'd like to thank all of our viewers and listeners for returning. And if you're new, welcome to the show. We are the personal, professional, and career development podcast. So whatever you need to know about your personal, professional, and career goals, we're here to support that. Along with us today is our very esteemed and accomplished guest speaker, Dr. John Hale. Good morning, John. How are you doing?
Morning. How are you, David? How are
Most
you, Dr.
excellent.
Joe?
I'm good. I'm good. Glad to have
Good.
you.
So tell us
Thank
a
you for
little bit
having me
about
on.
yourself, Dr. John.
A little about me. I prior military. I was enlisted for a few years and got out of the military, went over to casino gaming, was sent over to Australia for a few years to run their game development uh, and led their team globally. Came back to the U.S., started my own company, sold that about 3 years ago. Started a new distributorship with some friends out of Australia, and here I am now here in Mission Viejo. So
Wow, that's
happy
awesome.
to
That's awesome.
yeah
I'm a little bit
live.
envious of the Australia thing. I'll have to be
Yeah,
honest.
I've never been there. That'd be very
Australia
cool.
was amazing. It really was.
How
Yeah,
long were you there?
I was there for 2.5 years. So I lived in
Wow.
Sydney,
Okay.
Sydney, and bounced around in Melbourne and other parts there as well.
Okay.
So
Very
yeah,
cool.
All
really
right, so
good.
let's talk about today's topic. Today's topic is as I get older.
Yeah,
Now, I know we all look like we're like 22 to 26 here,
you
but
do,
we've
David.
got a
You know.
lot of experience within those 4 or 5 years, I'm telling you.
That's
So
right. Yeah, that's
so
right.
when we talk about as I get older, we start contemplating our past, which Joe and I talk about this very frequently, that deliberate critical self-reflection, really thinking about what we've done, why we've done it, how we've done it. And we verbally meditate on that. I'm going to say that's kind of something to think about, that concoction, verbal meditation.
That's
So
right.
I think that's just my own fancy way of saying we talk a lot. So so I think about the topic of as I get older. John, what are your thoughts on as I get older? Because you are a doctor like Joe and I, and you were prior military enlisted like Joe and
Yeah.
I. We've all been through very similar experiences. What are your thoughts? What have you gleaned throughout this very short journey that we've had?
Very short journey. That's funny. So, as I get older, I realize what I how much I don't know, you know,
Mm,
and the more you realize how much you don't know, the more you tend to learn and listen,
mm,
right?
Mhm.
And I've learned that I can learn from anyone at any time. So I have an open ear to ideas, to people, to cultures, to ways of life, different religions, because it's made me a better person.
mm.
I've also learned how to listen more than talk. So instead of being wanting to give an idea all the time and that kind of thing, I've learned to sit back and listen and reflect on what someone has to say and genuinely understand and listen to their ideas and that kind of thing. So
Yeah, you said something that kind of piqued my curiosity, and you said, um, oh geez, I just fell off that train of thought. Give me 1 second here.
Well, Dave, where you talk, so I can resonate with everything you just said, John. As we get older, now I understand how you become wiser, and
Mm,
and
that's
it,
right.
and it, and it's that approach that you just said, that you listen to understand, you pay
All right.
attention, and the idea that you can learn from everyone, and that to me has become, that's why I'll always be a lifelong learner. It's
mm,
just
That's right.
because yeah, I heard someone say this yesterday. I was watching something and they said, you know, even the masters are still learning, even though
mm,
they've reached a certain level of whatever their expertise is.
That's
The
right.
the fact that they continue to learn is that power that they continue to garner and continue to manifest forward. And so I agree 100% that that's I'm still, and me and Dave talk about this all the time. We talk about, we don't know what we want to be when we grow up. It's
That's right.
because that excitement is there of all this stuff out there that you can still do, you can still be. So yeah, I
Right.
really appreciate the way you said that.
Yeah, and where I was going with and Joe, you said something too, is um the the just the overall awareness and acceptance of people for, for who they are, understanding different cultures and religions, that is huge. It really starts taking away it starts diminishing quickly and significantly us versus them, and it starts approaching things more collectively. And Joe, you said, there comes a point, and I'm going to paraphrase my own way, when the master becomes a student and the student becomes the master, and it's that cycle, of just that deep learning. It's like you don't have to learn from just one person. You can actually, you know, become more knowledgeable, more wise than the person you learned from. And if they're in the right place, then they become the student and want to learn more, and it becomes this reciprocal relationship of growth.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And
It,
I've seen that work, across the world, right? You can go in and see different cultures and learn different things, and an iron sharpens an iron, right? And so you go
Right.
from there.
Yep.
So
You touched on a couple of things, Dave. You talked about the fact that you can have more than one person that that you're gaining your information from. And we talk about this on the podcast, the fact that me and you are here talking about things, but then we don't want them to just stop here, but go elsewhere and get all the information that you need. And John talked about this offline a little bit about the toolkit that toolbox that you carry around, and that's what it is. You're storing all this stuff in your toolbox so you can apply it at a later date when it's relevant. So that's the one thing. And then the other thing you talked about again is learning from I think a mentorship, when you typically the mentor is that person with all this knowledge and experience, but then that mentee still being able to teach you or have something that you don't know about. And I've been in that situation myself personally, where I come in here and expecting to mentor someone, and then I end up walking
you
out the
end up
door
getting
like
me.
scratching my head.
Right.
Wow, he just taught me
It
something.
just
And,
taught me something.
so yeah, just still that's again, that's what I get excited about. There's so much I don't know, and
Right.
then I just get excited about every time I learn something new. I'm just
That's right.
walking around like, wow, that's cool. Like Dave just talked about again on offline, talking a little bit about AI. We weren't really engaged in it. Now we're like, oh wow, this is very cool. So that's still kind of the same attitude that I have toward a lot of things. Like it's just brand
Right.
new. This kid in this candy store with all these cool things in front of me. So
That's right. Well, I also heard, as I've gotten older, you have to have the humility to be able
yeah,
to to take that you don't know everything, right?
right.
And
Mhm.
you
Yep.
come with a humble heart, and and an open mind, and then you're able to learn. If you go into some place and say, "Oh, I know everything, this and that," and how am I going to learn from this person? Or you know, your humbleness can, I mean, without being humble, it can stifle your ability to learn something new.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I've had to learn to be, you could always talk about being humble, but actually having the connotation of acting and understanding what that means, over the years has really,
Yeah.
you know, I've learned that.
And I'm gonna kind of go to the other side of that. I love the aspect of being humble. We learned it in our educational journey that
Yeah,
there's so much that we don't know, and the more curious you are, the more open you are, the more receptive you are, the more you can really gain in a short period of time and longitudinally.
right,
And when I think about learning and being humble, when I go into organizations, I'm very curious.
yeah,
And Joe and I've talked about this being curious before, that being very curious about the company, the culture, what are they trying to do? What's worked? What
right,
hasn't worked? What are the
mhm,
teams like? What are the different divisions in the company look like? What are the leaders of those companies and the management and line staff? How do they interact? How they don't interact? And my mind starts going down these organizational rabbit holes to make connections and find out where the strengths are, where are the people that would like assistance that aren't getting it, and where are the people that don't want it, and they're the opposite of humility. They're arrogant and they see humility as a
right.
weakness.
They
And
do.
I think that's I think that's a disparity in perception out there. I'm reading
Yes.
online, that people over a certain age now are having a very difficult time finding work, and there's reasons behind it. Well, those reasons to me, if I were to publish, well, this is the reason why I'm not hiring a person of a certain age or a certain whatever, that crosses a line. So is it really a reason, or are they trying to find an excuse as to not why they shouldn't bring on someone with the experience, the knowledge, the education, the
That's right.
breadth and scope of experience, and the
That's right.
willingness to learn as they've grown, versus someone who's, as we've mentioned offline, is kind of stepped into a leadership role without understanding what it's like to be a line staff employee. There's a totally different perspectives, and I think
Yeah.
there's a potential there for many people to lose that humbleness and gratefulness, and
Right.
just, instead of really embracing each other as a collective unit to say, hey, we're all on the same side and truly mean it at its core,
That's right.
we miss something, that agape love we talked about a couple
I was
episodes
just gonna
ago.
mention agape. Yeah.
It's and for listeners, it's not a um it's not a physical love. I'm going to just leave it at that. It's the
Right.
love of people because people are important, and
Yeah.
respecting that regardless of their backgrounds, regardless of their experiences. And it's like like you said, John, you've learned so much from so many different people, just by keeping that open, humble mind to
Yeah.
say, I don't know everything. And I think that's a level of growth that comes with people who are deliberate about understanding the environments and that desire to learn. Like you said, Joe, we're always talking about what I want to do when I grow up. When I was doing military briefings, for those transitioning military members, they're like, the question would come up, and I'm like, I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And they're like, they looked at me like, but you're up there telling us we need to do. I was like, yeah, be open
Yeah.
to everything. Don't put yourself in a shoebox.
Right. That's it. No, you're right.
Well, I was gonna. I might have lost my train of thought too. But I want to go back to something that John said early on when he talked about sitting back and kind of listening, taking it in. And I had this conversation with a group of people on the other day, and that was the way I approach things as well. A lot of times I sit in a room and people will look at me because I have the doctor title, and they'll be looking at me to respond, to
Right.
make a comment. And I'm like, just because I have that title does not mean I know everything.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
right.
a doctor, not a physician.
No, I've heard that.
Yeah, well, yeah. So it's that
Yeah.
assumption that you got this title, so you must know
You
everything.
must know everything about
Uh,
everything. Right.
exactly. And
Yeah.
so and that's the way I approach things, and that's what I relate to them. I typically will observe, just to see what's happening, see what's going on. And
Right.
then when I do speak, it is because, either I don't understand something, or I do have a comment that may be of value. But
That's
yeah,
right.
I don't just, people are like, why don't you say something? That's not me. I'm not going to come kick in the door.
I'm the same
Listen to
way.
me. I'm Dr. Hamlet. I got all the
Yeah.
answers. And
Yeah.
so,
Right. And I've found a lot of joy out of oftentimes them not even knowing that I'm a doctor,
a-
Mm.
and that you're
absolutely.
coming in and you're able to contribute, and they go, well, where do you get all
Exactly.
this stuff from? And then you can go back and say, well, I have a
Exactly.
degree in here and that, because there's a difference between coming into a room and Dr. Hale or Dr. Ham, Dr. Peltz, or being a doctor
Mhm.
and
Right.
being able to facilitate and help. And then they come to you and go, wow, where'd you get that from? Well, I have a study in this and that. So I
Yeah.
found a lot of pleasure in there, in doing it that way as well.
Yeah, and
So
I think that's a true sign of of humility, because you're not using your title as a
yeah,
tool or as an influence.
that's right.
It's just you
Right.
coming in being your genuine you. And
Yeah,
I think that says a lot about how we've grown as individuals. It's not even a generational thing. It's an
that's right.
individual level of maturity
That's
and
right.
acceptance.
Yeah,
And I think that was a great point, John. That was an awesome point. I'd love to
yeah,
Yeah.
dig
I
down on
agree.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, because that's part of the conversation as well. I share some examples of, like you said, you come in a room and you just blend in,
yeah.
and everything's okay. But as soon
Right.
as, that title gets thrown out there, then things are different. then they
Things are
look at
just,
you
that's right.
different. Then
They,
yeah, so then your
there's certain expectations that
and that's exactly what I was going to say.
get
The
in.
expectations are there,
That
and
I
so
get
you're
in.
right. I've met people, and I've had people that haven't found out for 2 years
Right.
that I was a doctor because it wasn't relevant to the conversation. It
Correct.
wasn't relevant to the relationship we had.
Right.
And then later they come back and say, "Wow, when did you become a doctor?" Just recently, I'm like, "No,
No,
I've been a doctor
been
for a
there
few years."
for a
Been there for a
while,
little
right?
while, for a little
Yeah,
while.
a little bit. Yep.
Yeah.
You know, on that point, I was talking to you guys a little bit about the Stoic philosophy and that kind of thing, and
Right.
understanding that. And so, what I've also learned is in those conversations, once you go into those rooms and you understand and you facilitate, what I've learned is you can't change your external environment, right? But you can change internal.
Right.
So you can take a lot of that information that you're receiving, you're learning, and you can make yourself better so that when you go into those environments again, you have even more to contribute. So
Right.
I just love being in that type of environment to where I can listen and help and that kind of thing without them even knowing kind of who I am and my background. That's one, selfishly, it can make myself a better person to be able to give even more. It's kind of one of the
Yeah, I love the opportunities to be talking in a discussion and, you know, like similar stories to you guys. It's like, hey, let's connect on social media. Okay. And they're like, oh, you're a doctor. Or, you know, you help staff, management leadership or line staff, and they're like, wow, that was some really good stuff. And then you see them, you know, a few weeks or a few months later, I didn't know you were a doctor. It's like, I didn't tell you I was a doctor. How did you know about this, stalker? No. It's like,
right.
you know, it's like, that makes me feel better
It
because
does,
it's like
right? Yeah,
they accept you who you are in that
that's right.
moment versus for a title
Right.
or what someone else has told them. You're just being genuine with them. You're being
Right.
authentic
That's
with
right.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's the best, the best way to get points across and to learn and to facilitate learning as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it doesn't put up that immediate barrier or that
That's right.
immediate assumption of again who you think you are. Because again, some people do say, "I'm a doctor, you're going to listen to me," and so that is sometimes the first thing people think of is that's how you're going to
Right.
be, and so
Yeah,
they
yeah, that's
immediately shut off.
right. And that comes with as we get older, we understand, and it's just
Absolutely.
the wisdom behind
Yeah.
some of the accomplishments that we've had, right? So,
Right.
Well, and
so
those accomplishments aren't necessarily, and I think this is a point that we can that might facilitate the discussion, that accomplishments aren't always that, hey, here's you've received this award or recognition. It's sometimes it's just getting through bad times in an environment. You know, that's an
absolutely
accomplishment in itself because they say it's, you know, succeeding is not learning. Learning comes from um attempts that did not work out the way you wanted them to or expected them to.
right.
And I'm not using the word failure deliberately because you're not failing. As long as you're learning, you're not failing.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I think
Yeah,
that's that part of wisdom piece that we talk about when we talk about, you know, as I get older, are you really open to what's going on out there? Or have you kind of shut down and you're to the point where you're saying, well, I'm not going to do that because I'm this, you know, I'm not doing that anymore because I'm that, you know, I've been there, done that. I don't need to know anything more about it. It's like,
yeah.
you know, society moves, you know,
Oh,
Right.
it
Yep.
that's
keeps
right.
going. It's
Absolutely.
nothing.
That's right.
It's that's why I said in the beginning, in our short time, you know, because relatively speaking,
True.
you know, what we're here is very, very short. Are we maximizing that opportunity, this opportunity of life to
Right.
really engage and get the most out of it? Or are we
Right.
sitting there feeling sorry for ourselves and just playing that victim instead of understanding what put us in that position and how do we get out
Absolutely.
of that perception or situation or perception?
It's almost like having a closed loop system on yourself to where you go through a process and well, I wouldn't say fail, but you learn something. You take that learning opportunity and bring it back to the front to
Yep.
make yourself better. And bringing that back to the front can oftentimes be a hard conversation with yourself internally to go, okay,
Right.
well, you know what? I
Yeah.
could have done that a little bit better or that. And you got to have I wouldn't say insecure, but you got to have the ability to take those lessons and to try to make yourself better, right? And if you don't, then you're not really improving, in my opinion. Like, you
Yeah.
gotta take your learning and get better. And I try to do that all the time.
Absolutely. And I think the way you said the closed loop circle, yeah, because it all is internal. It's
Right.
and it comes down to that point, and we've talked about this before. It could be the difference between you being a victim or a victor.
That's
Because
it.
like you say, you're like, I tried it, I'm done. That's it.
Right.
Or you could say, well, I tried it this way. I'm going to try it another way to see how
That's
far
right.
it can go. So you're right. I like the way you say that, a closed loop circle, because it
Yeah.
is all internal. It's
Yeah.
you, maybe fighting with some of those things that are internal to you. And I think it
internal
was,
things, right?
yeah, it was said earlier that, we can control internal. We can, control those things external
That's
to
right.
us. So
All
And
we can
that's
do
where
is
that
control.
deliberate critical self-reflection is. And Joe and I have talked about this. You have to be brutally honest with yourself
Yeah.
when you're
Absolutely.
when you're conducting that exercise of deliberate critical self-reflection. And you
Yeah.
might see some things and learn some things about yourself that you're not happy with.
Oh
And that's
yeah.
okay.
That's right.
That's
Yeah.
okay. And you either accept it and say, hey, I'm going to wear a black t-shirt today, or well, maybe I should change my shirt, that
Right.
sort of thing. So, and that brutal self-honesty it's a very humbling experience.
Very
It
much
really
so.
is. When you say,
Yeah.
I'm not perfect. I'm an expert in this, but I'm not an expert
That's
in
right.
all of this. There's so much
Right.
more to learn. There's so much more to gain and glean
Yeah.
from everyone else that's preceded me, that follows me. And from
Yeah.
this point forward, what can I still learn about this?
Right. Yeah. And how can I improve? And those
Mhm.
conversations can be brutal, like you said,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And you have to be able to take their information and look at yourself in the mirror and go, okay,
Here's
John,
what I
this
got to
Right.
do.
is
Yeah.
this is what I got to do, right? If
Yep.
you're not going to do it,
If
then
you
you're not
want,
being true to yourself.
yep.
And it's a really hard conversation. It's a conversation that no one else externally can have with you. It has to
Right.
be an internal conversation.
Yep.
Yep.
And
And to
now,
accept and to
yeah,
accept that perception of what you're finding about yourself. It's
that's
like,
right.
wow, Joe was right. Maybe I should wear a
Yes,
different color. A
that's right.
green shirt on a green screen is
That's right.
not the best choice.
That's right. And some of those times where we actually go, well, maybe that person was right that I should have done this. And you have to sit there and go, well, man, John, you gotta kind of, I guess the person was right, right? And you have to just be able to bring it in and take it in and make yourself better. And that's, as we've gotten older, I think all of
Yep.
us are learning how to do that with grace, right?
Yeah,
And
with
Yep.
grace.
just to
Yeah,
give yourself
that is great.
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'm jotting that down. That would be a great topic.
no,
Well,
yeah. Go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, if you think about with our kids, so I've got 3 adult kids now, and you think back to when they were kids, and you're trying to tell them something because you want to help them, but a lot of times it's not until they experience it themselves, and then they come back and say,
Absolutely.
"Oh, Dad was right,"
That's
So,
right.
and all of us experienced that. My dad was trying to tell me things, and I'm like, "Yeah,
That's right.
whatever. You're an old dude," So I'm like,
Right.
I'm not gonna listen to you, and
Yeah.
then come back and like, "Oh, wow, he was right."
He
So
was he
yeah,
was, he was right.
so yeah, so we try and help people. We try and provide advice. That's why I say even about our podcast, we throw out all these things that might help them. But again, it's up to them to maybe utilize it or try it. And then they may come back, like you said, and say, "Oh, Dr. Joe, Dr. J, or Dr. Dave and Joe were right or correct, or had
Yeah.
Or
had
gave
some
me
substance
something
in
to
what they're
think, at least think
right."
about
Yeah,
and
exactly.
contemplate,
Yeah.
That's
that
right.
different perspective. And that's why we love to have guest speakers, is because, Joe and I have done dozens and dozens of episodes by ourselves. And and as much as we like to talk to each other, like two little kids on a playground, it's like,
Oh, it's great.
we don't want free time to be over with. We want to continue to play outside. It's like, but we understand that there's still so much to learn out there,
Oh, it's just so much, right?
and I don't know about you guys, but when I was younger, I didn't think I could ever go to college. And once I started going to college, I realized I had the cognitive capacity to do the things that I didn't believe I could do. And then I fell in love with learning. And then I fell
It's
in love with
great, isn't it?
lifelong learning,
Yeah.
and then deliberate
Yeah.
lifelong learning. And it's like, now it's
Yeah.
like, I love comedies, but I would much rather watch, 10 documentaries on the same topic to get the different perspectives to
Right.
understand what's really going on instead of just one person's view.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. I love it. Yep. No, I was also going back to what you said, Joe, about about your kids and that kind of thing as well. And when I was, I've had some time. I've taught school and that kind of thing. And one thing I used to teach my kids is about instant and delayed gratification, right? And I think a lot of times we get into the, this is a whole different kind of veering off here, but it's all relevant. When you're making yourself better, you got to also look at that. Well, is this going to be an instant change, or is this going to be a delayed change where I'm going to see the results down the road? And for myself, a lot of things that I had to change it was going to be a delayed gratification because I had some internal things that I had to take care of, right? And it's just something that you have to look at. And
it's kind of like building a house versus painting a house.
That's
painting
right.
a house, painting a room, you get that immediate gratification. You put that color on the wall and you're like, wow, that's
Wow, look at that
awesome.
color.
I can't wait to get the rest of it done. But when you build a house, it's like that takes
brick by
time.
brick. It takes time, right? And so then you look back and go, oh, look at that house I built.
Yeah.
When you first starting, it's like, oh, this brick and this brick, and this. You're just gonna have the vision to keep going and know the results are coming.
I think that's what that last thing you just said is very important. That ability to see what doesn't exist today, the visibility. That's also important because, like you say, you're looking for that instant gratification a lot of times, and it doesn't happen. Are you going to be able to continue to go forward if you can't see it? And so that sometimes that deters people. And I'll admit that's what happened to me when I started, my education. And when I sat down and talked to the counselors, and they were like, "Well, it's going to take you this long." I was like, "Oh my goodness, I can't do this. That's too long, too far down the road." And I can't
thinking
see
about something that's that big, that's that far out is just it can be scary. It can be terrifying.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we're starting to wind down. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left in this show. So let's I'm going to start with you, Joe. Joe, any final thoughts on As I Get Older? Not me, as you get older. I mean, it's as I get older, but from your perspective.
Yeah. So again, I think we've all touched on some very important things. As you get older, I like the idea that I still go into things with a really open mind to what could happen, to the possibilities, and I have gotten better at that visualization piece, that piece where I can't see it today, but I know if I keep working toward it, I'll eventually continue building those, putting that brick by brick by brick until it's completed. So I just encourage everybody else out there to, hopefully get to a point where you're taking in all those things and then applying it to however it's going to benefit you. Continue research, continue learning, continue growing to get you to that next level. So I'll end there.
That's great, Joe. I mean, that's wow. I'm not sure I can. It's not a competition, but Dr. John Hale, any final thoughts?
No.
What are your final thoughts?
If I can give anything, I would just always remember, life's about constantly improving, and don't beat yourself up too much, right? Just keep taking your learning and getting better and doing that closed loop, as we used to say back in my tech days. And just try to improve, learn and improve. So that's what I would like to offer to everyone.
Well, thank you, Dr. John Hale, for joining us. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedule and joining us in this collaborative effort. Really enjoyed the conversation. As always, Joe, this is why we do it, folks. This is why we do it. We love to share this knowledge and wisdom, as we get older, with others that are younger and older than us or the same age, because that's part of that whole learning process. So with that, we'd like to thank our viewers and listeners for joining us on another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, your personal, professional, and career development podcast. If you like the show, please like it and share it. Put the word out. This is our weekly podcast, and if you're new to it, we hope you enjoyed it and continue coming back. If you want to reach out to Dr. John Hale, the information's down below. Always happy to talk with you, Dr. John. And with that, we'd like to ask our viewers and listeners to keep on being your not so ordinary you.
Thank you.